Jolly good show, Brigadier number 45.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're listening to Unity FM, 93.5 FM. Welcome to my show. I'm Shalina Litt, and as always, I'll be talking about the complex subject of raising children. With me today, I'm glad to say I have Martin Glynn. Welcome to the show, Martin.
Yeah, greetings. Thanks for the invite.
Okay, so I know that your background is quite vast in terms of, what you've done up until today. But today's topic that I wanted to discuss was broken families. And as a sub-strand of that, absent fathers. Now, in my experience, I know a lot of women who play mommy and daddy. They work, they go and get an education, they raise the children, they do the cooking, they do the cleaning, they tutor their children, and then you get the fathers that turn up and almost ever see their children, and for me, it's a challenging subject, one that I'm very passionate about, but please explain what's your background, and we're going to talk about this subject hopefully, inshallah.
Well, in relation to this, first I'd like to say I'm a father and I'm a grandfather. And I've been a range of different types of fathers. I've been a very young father. I was a father at 16 and a half, became an older father. So from that point of view, that's I'm experienced on a personal level. Professionally, I'm a criminologist, and one of the areas that I specialise in is the issue of masculinity and manhood, but specifically relating to fathers.
Okay.
One of the things that's very clear in terms of the evidence, that the impact of a father's absence on the psychology of a child, on the health of a family, and in terms of community. So if you take statistically, the criminal justice system, currently we've got a huge amount of African Caribbean people in the system. We've got over 10,500 British Muslims in the prison system.
Wow.
If you put that into the context of their children, you can see that incarceration is a massive factor where fathers are not present. Fathers are not present because they're ill. Fathers are not present because they get deported. Fathers, one of the, I suppose, is a disturbing thing, which is as a consequence of affluent societies, is the emotionally unavailable father. A father who is working long hours, doesn't spend a lot of time with their children, can generate the kind of income that can give their children a lot of external gratification, but without actually engaging with the young men and the young women the way they need to. And that has a massive impact. So you'll find that like the current bling culture, everybody wants to kind of blame, they want to blame young people. But in some respects, as parents, we need to shoulder some responsibility for the way in which we've almost bought into that notion that somehow a PlayStation or a television in your bedroom or a computer is a substitute for storytelling, sitting around the table and eating. So what I'm saying is my academic research really is looking at the impact on public health and as a health disparity, because it affects people massively. You mentioned women. Anybody who's a single parent who has to pick up the slack to substitute the other person not being there, it's a huge burden on the other individual.
Absolutely. And one thing that I think is very apparent is these women that juggle 101 jobs, they are severely depressed or their health is suffering. And, it's a great concern that they're working under such strenuous conditions. And I often wonder, is there a misunderstanding in how we spend time with our children? As an early years practitioner, I would always say to my parents, you can't just buy a toy and put it in front of your child and think job done. You have to spend time with that child, engage with that child, show them how to play with things. And I think it's the same with how we spend time with our children, the fathers, the mothers. I think there's no value. You can't put a cost to that.
But I think
reading a storybook.
But I think that what's happened is there's been a cultural shift. Technology has had a huge impact. For instance, if you're looking at early years learning, when I was growing up and I raised my children, there was no internet, there was no apps on a mobile phone. you had no choice. I mean, even if you didn't want to do it, you either read to your child or you didn't. I think that we have a culture that finds it difficult to look at what's the right thing to do, because one is there is an extraordinary amount of choice. The other thing that's problematic in the culture that we have is around cultural expectations.
Yeah.
We have children of all different cultures in a classroom, and each one of those cultures experiences society differently. So I remember, frequently you might see a young Muslim child whose mother or father might say, I want you to do this.
Right.
Who will turn around and say to the parents, well, my friend Johnny is a white guy, he doesn't have to do this. And so what you also find is that there is a kind of cultural separation of expectation. And I think in some respects, that also leads to a culture of denial. Some people think, it doesn't exist. Some people think it's going to go away. Some people think, well, if they drink different types of water, it won't happen. But I think in a way, it's about individuals and families and communities.
Now, interesting statistic. I mean, it's been a year and a month on from the riots where, the streets were literally, ransacked, and I think the statistics was strong statistics saying that majority of the people involved came from broken families. So would you say that there is a connection there?
Well, I mean, again, me being a criminologist, I was somebody that had to advise on the riots panel around some of the explanations about why. In criminology, we have a thing called relative deprivation, and relative deprivation is based on the way that some individuals or communities perceive that other communities have more or different things to what they have. And I think that, we have inner city communities that are run down. We have, the basis of family breakdown is not just a sense of people wake up in the morning, they don't get on. There's a whole series of factors. There's health factors, there is cultural factors, there's political factors, and as I said, hopefully over the course of the discussion, we'll be able to explore it further.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to hopefully we've got Abdul Wahid on the line. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Welcome to the show again.
Thank you very much.
Okay, did you manage to catch the beginning of the show?
No, I missed it.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
So we're talking about absent fathers.
Yeah.
I as always, I want to get the Islamic perspective. Where do you stand from an Islamic perspective as a father? The mother, the child. Can we look at those different areas?
Bismillah. I think what's important to highlight is that there's often this misconception that the father's role or his only role is to financially maintain and to bring money into their house. He's the maintainer, he's the breadwinner, and, the woman's the homemaker, she's the one that, looks after the children and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But the role of the father in looking after, or the role of the male, whether it's the father or if the father's passed away and the child's an orphan, would be another male member, is essential and important in the actual cultivation and the emotional education of the child as well. And there's many examples of that in the seerah, for example, of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You find that he was an orphan. His father passed away before he was born. Yet his mother made sure, for example, that he was raised by his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib. Mm-hmm. And then when his grandfather passed away, his uncle Abu Talib raised him. And there was always that love and care from the father in the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or from of a male figure that was there to the point that when Abu Talib was on his deathbed, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to visit him and to beseech him to take his shahada because of the strong attachment that there was between them.
So it seems interesting here, and I want to bring Martin Glynn in, who, I hope you're familiar with who Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is. And we were saying then that there seemed to be a consistency in saying that, okay, maybe his father wasn't around, but, there was always that male role model there in place. So is that correct?
Yeah.
Within...
That's right. Go ahead.
Sorry, within a lot of traditional societies, Aboriginal, Native American, the establishment of manhood in relationship to being a father is clearly defined through ritual and rites of passage. Mm-hmm. in the West, we don't have that. So there is not a process that defines manhood in relationship to responsibility as a father. And you'll find within faith communities the emphasis on marriage, the emphasis on taking responsibility as a moral position in terms of raising children. It's just that we live in a Western, so-called democratic, capitalist environment that doesn't really foster and engender the kind of values of fatherhood. And an example would be, and I've just done the analysis on this, in America, it costs the Americans $100 billion a year. It costs the Australians, with a small population, 20 billion Australian dollars. And I've worked out that in terms of the economic cost to the country, in terms of mental health, prisons, death, all sorts of issues, it costs this country about $50 billion purely in father absence terms alone. But what happens is, if you look at the reasons why those fathers are absent in terms of socially, you can see that for the middle classes in particular, they are not necessarily impacted in the same way by the absence as those people in the inner city or cultures that are actually under threat. So what I'm suggesting is this is an epidemic. It's not something that's just a statistic. The evidence is there in the disaffection of our young people. I have recently done a lot of work with a group of young men in Feltham Young Offenders Institution. Feltham Young Offenders Institution has 750 young men. 200 have been sentenced for murder. When I worked out the kind of economics and the cost on their victims, of those 750, of which about 50% of them have children, you can see that within criminal justice, mental health, people in hospital, if you put those fathers in there, and then you're talking about young fathers, 16, 17, who don't take the responsibility but are fathers nonetheless, you can start to see that we live in a culture, that we live in a very fatherless culture.
Wow, okay. So bearing that in mind then, so when we look at the whole word absent fathers, then some of it really is out of the control of the father if they do fall into them things. So taking it back to Quran and Sunnah, Abdul Wahid is the Imam of ICT in Croydon, London. What advice would you give then to a father who who is trying to see their child? Where is their stance, their responsibility on that child as a man?
Well, I can say, from a personal point of view, I had a situation recently where, even in my own parenting with my children, because my children are like big women now, and we were estranged for a particular period, and I had to go through a process of reconnection. And I think in some respects that, we have a lot of after-school clubs. We have a lot of, how can I put it, services targeted at keeping people entertained and all sorts of stuff. What I believe is required is a father absent strategy, where community plays a far stronger role in reconnecting fathers who are disconnected from their children and actually broker those relationships, because there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of hurt, and there's a lot of anger. And I've always maintained that faith communities, based on the kind of moral and ethical position of a faith communities are far better positioned to play a significant role in that than, say, social services or public sector organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Abdul Wahid, the one reason that I think ICT in Croydon as a faith-based community thing is that's how they started out. Am I right in saying that, Abdul Wahid? You started out doing things for the youth, didn't you?
Yes.
So can you just build on that?
One of the, without a doubt, the point that was made by your guest is definitely true. The faith community are best placed to actually perhaps begin these type of absent father strategies and to do their best to do something about it, because of the attachment to or the importance of family in faith in Islam, and how important the role, each person's role is in educating and nurturing the child.
Yeah.
And I think what needs to be emphasised is an advice not just to the father but also to the mothers as well, because in a lot of times when there's a breakdown in the relationship between the husband and the wife, the children are the ones that are made to suffer. So, for example, you might find the wife saying, you're not
financially
provided, putting money in. So that would be a reason for him not to come around, because he's going to think, okay, I haven't got the money, there's no point going around. But what's more important is the emotional investment that he's going to make in his child. That has, as if not more important, at least as significant is of significant importance.
Martin, you want to say something
Yeah.
on that?
Cultivation, yeah.
What I wanted to say to the speaker is this. Recently, when I advised the riots panel, I remember I was asked to go down there to look at the issue of father absence, and as I stepped into the room, there was the single-parent mothers lobby sitting in the same room as fathers' rights, and they actually didn't get on. And what I had to remind people is that there needs to be a responsible conversation about bringing the two sections together for the sake of the children. So what I'm saying is the politics of father absence, because when I look at father absence, I actually don't look at the father or the mother. I look at the child that's been impacted, because I went through that with my own life. So in some respects, one of the things that I also think is important, and certainly from where you're based in London, is to make sure that any university department that's accessing public funds to do research around families actually supports what you're doing at the academic level, because academics inform politicians. And what happens is that there's this disconnect between academics, strategic agencies and community. The way that I work is by bringing academia, strategic agencies, community all together as one, because the kind of arguments you're talking about, unless they take place in the House of Lords and the House of Commons and the riots panel, what happens is it becomes anecdotal evidence that makes a lot of people who are affected by this very angry. So I'm just supporting what you're saying and saying I'm interested in taking it a stage further, because this is about taking personal responsibility, because out of the 120,000 people that David Cameron's identified as problem families, the definition of a problem family is problematic, because society is impacted on our communities in a very... If you take the rise of Islamophobia and the impact that's on families, that's very much something that society needs to address, because it impacts... Certainly when I'm working in prison and I'm working with young Muslim men who have turned to crime as a way of either defending the family or defending the community based on the problems they're facing, what you realise is there needs to be a reframing of the conversation and actually naming it differently so that people feel connected to the issue.
So what I wanted to say then is that, clearly when I always do the show, I always bring in the Islamic perspective, because as Muslims, we should love for the sake of Allah. So we read the Quran, it's a book of guidance, we do as we're commanded to do. And then we have what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has also done. We have stories that empower certain ayats from the Quran. So what I'm trying to say is that for me, yes, we can go to a government scale, we can go in there, but bringing it back to the inside the house, behind closed doors, you've got that single parent, you've got that child, what does Quran and Sunnah say?
I think, what's important is that there's obviously we all do our bit on a grassroots level, and we don't say we're not going to do anything until there's policy and stuff like that. But without a doubt, what the speaker is saying is definitely valid. Whoever's able to obviously influence policy because they're academic or because they're a policy think tank or they're a public body, then that discussion needs to be had at that level without a doubt.
Absolutely.
But we're not going to wait until that happens for us to do something ourselves. We're going to be active in actually trying to resolve and have a look at this as a problem area.
I suppose,
and without a doubt, the Quran and the Sunnah in it has lots of examples of guidance. Like, for example, there's a lovely example of in the life of the Prophet Muhammad, who was with children in general, not just his own children. So he once, he used to, for example, there's a hadith where it mentions about showing mercy to the young, being merciful, kind towards the young. Whoever doesn't show compassion towards the young is not from us.
Are you talking about the one where the man has 10 children and he says that he doesn't kiss any of them? Yeah,
and then there's that example as well, shown, for example.
Can you go into that? I think that's a really important hadith.
There's a hadith where there's a man was with the Prophet Muhammad when he saw him kiss, one of his nephews, Al-Hassan or Al-Hussein, and he said that I've got 10 children, I haven't kissed one of them, and the Messenger of Allah said, what am I to do if Allah hasn't put compassion in your heart? I learned, for example, that it's important to have compassion with children. The emotional nurturing that some people might think that that's only for the women, and men they have to just bring money in and put money in down. They don't have to engage with the child. That understanding is damaging to the development of the child itself or of the children themselves. I think there was a study which was done recently. I think it was within the last couple of months. Looking at this, you may be familiar with it. It's talking about the importance of the emotional input from the father, and if that's absent, the negative consequences that has on the child in later life, how he becomes, for example, a person that's lacking socially in many areas. So, yeah, without a doubt, there's a lot of guidance in that.
I just wanted to say something as well, is the fact that in my work, because I work across all communities, and I think for me, resolving, because I'm into solution-focused approaches, and I think within my work in criminology, as a lecturer, I'm always encouraging Muslim students to put an Islamic position on how they see crime or anything that they position themselves in the classroom. And I think that in some respects, the issue of parenting, if there are Islamic implications and situations, I think what it's about is how do non-Muslims, people like myself, listen to people like yourself and influence how I may have to influence other people. So I think in some respects, not only does things start in the home, but I also think it starts in the context of community where non-Muslims and Muslims sit together and discuss something of common concern, but respect there are differences in the way that we do it. In my own experience of working in prisons and in schools, certainly you'll find when I work with Muslim men, with children, they have a range of parenting concerns sometimes that because they've committed a crime, they see themselves as not proper Muslims, in inverted commas, so they're more liable to sit with me because they're frightened of the judgment. And I think and I sometimes have to say to them, I'm not an imam, I don't feel I've got the insight to what you need. But what they do say is that they feel that there's a kind of stigma, and there's sometimes things are hidden, that when you've transgressed, it's not that simple when you're parenting from a prison cell to say that I'm a decent parent because I write my children every week. And
wow, two very powerful points there that I want to go over. If you want to call in on this subject, I'll be taking in calls after the advert break. It's 0121 772 8892. Okay, we do have a caller on another line. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Apologies if it's very noisy. I'm actually in the car, but I just caught a bit of your show.
Okay.
I just wanted to make a very brief comment, please.
Can you speak up, please? It sounds very low.
Right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Basically, just wanted to make a quick comment about what that, the society that we live in. And I think one of your guests made a point about the community having a part to play in how, children, they grow up and what influences them in terms of crime. And I just want to say that, generally speaking, I think that, Islam, it does teach us morals, it does teach us values, but I think one of the main things that it teaches us is our accountability, that we are responsible for our actions, for everything that we say and we do. And I think that in the society we live in, it's very secular, where religion is usually made as boogeyman.
Speak up, sis, because it's a bit...
Why do we have religious schools? Is there a need? What does the religion do anyway? So I think that I'm sure many of the schools as well would I think the discussion needs to be had to showcase Islam as a way of life that makes you into a responsible person, and really showcasing how really we neglect kids to live in, kind of carpe diem way of life of just freedom, enjoying yourself, and not caring about the repercussions of your actions.
Absolutely,
there are going to be problems. I think we just really showcase Islam is something that actually has boundaries. Yes, it may be confused us, however, you all need rules. Yes, but just maybe perhaps looking a bit more into the role of religion in society and how it would deal with some of these problems from purely the point of view in our actions. I mean, do you believe that there's two angels on our shoulders watching us?
Yeah, absolutely. Sister, the line is actually quite poor, but, you made some really valid points there, mashallah, and thank you so much for calling in on that. I just wanted to take it back to our guests. I think 2 points have come up that are really important. One that Abdul Wahid made, which is that as women, we shouldn't focus so much on the financial contribution when studies have shown us that the emotional contribution far outweighs it. And I guess from an Islamic perspective, if a man hasn't got the money, then he hasn't got the money. And that's between him and God. And then also the point that you made, Martin, was that as a professional, you find that a lot of people come to you and, you almost find yourself, schooling them or counselling them on Islam. So, Abdul Wahid, what advice could you give to Martin as somebody who is that middleman, who has the Muslims that come to him and are ready to,
I think he mentioned it really, is that, that the channels of communication are open, that we've got common interests. So we're working together for those common interests. I just want to add as well that, parenting and absent fathers, for example, and the importance of, for example, the role of the father in the children, it's not something which is just Islamic, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
There's guidelines, obviously, there's certain things which are prescribed, which obviously, as a practitioner, he'd have to know. But generally speaking, we're talking about universal values.
Okay.
Of love and compassion. And
we're going to be
like
coming
this.
up to an advert break now.
Okay.
So if you could hold that thought. Are you okay staying on? I know that you wasn't expecting to stay on this long.
Yeah, I should be okay.
Okay, so we'll be back after the break, inshallah.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
You're listening to Unity FM on 93.5. I'm 8 years old and even I know it's the best station in Brum. Bye.
Caspian Pizza, the first halal pizza franchise in the UK. Along with all the Firm family favourites, why not try our new meatball pizza? Or you can create your own. We also have side orders including pastas, barbecue or spicy chicken wings, burgers, chicken strippers, mozzarella sticks and garlic mushrooms. Come along and mention Unity FM to get a 10% discount. And by the way, all our meats are HMC approved. To find your local store and franchise opportunities, visit www.caspianpizza.com.
फैमिली के साथ आइए और कैस्पियन पिज़्ज़ा का लुत्फ उठाइए.
Planning on going on Hajj or Umrah? Ensure that you have your affairs in order prior to departing on this journey of a lifetime by preparing your Islamic will. It is narrated by the Blessed Prophet, peace be upon him, that it is a duty of every Muslim who has anything to bequeath not to let 2 nights pass without writing a will about it. Sahih al-Bukhari. I Will Solicitors is a leading Muslim provider of Islamic wills in the country. Our solicitors can help you prepare your Islamic will before you leave for Hajj. For a free consultation, call 0121 288 8808 or visit iwillsolicitors.com. We also specialise in inheritance tax planning, probate, court of protection work and trust matters. That's 288 8808. I Will Solicitors. Professional, trusted, efficient.
The wait is over. Kids Go Wild is where fun never ends. It's the UK's first ladies and children's only indoor soft play centre. Our play equipment includes separate baby and toddler area, larger play area, a football basketball court and our very own cafe. Visit kidsgowild.co.uk for more info. Also on site, Bodytone Gym Fitness for ladies. Come and check out our new purpose-built gym or visit bodytone-gym.co.uk. Located on Fernley Road, Sparkhill, B11 3NL or ring 772-3632. 2 amazing businesses, 1 great location. Opening Monday, 2nd July.
Are you looking for the ideal restaurant to get together with family and friends? Then La Favorita is the place to be. We offer the very best Italian and Asian cuisine, along with a full range of French patisseries. Enjoy our mouth-watering steaks, homemade pastas, freshly made pizzas, mixed grills, and fresh karahis. Remember, all our meat is 100% halal. We have segregated areas for families and a children's play area. To make a booking, call 771 4112 or visit 72 Alfred Street, Sparkbrook, B12 8JP. Alternatively, visit lafavorita.co.uk for more info.
Looking for the perfect venue for your wedding, special occasion or conference? Then look no further. Mayfair Conference and Banqueting Suite, Birmingham's finest venue. Bespoke packages for your individual needs with parking facilities for up to 500 vehicles, 2 segregated halls and in-house halal catering services. Let the Mayfair team make your special day a memorable one. Don't miss our grand opening offers. We also offer complete wedding services. Check out our website mayfairsuite.co.uk for full details. Call us now on 0121 5533 675 or visit us at the Mayfair Suite, Park Lane, Birmingham, B21 8LE, near the West Brom football ground.
Rasulullah alayhi salam said, education is an obligation on every Muslim. Just £42 will pay for a child's education for a whole year. Make a difference today. Change a child's life forever. Donate now to ISRA UK on 0121 766 8771 or donate online at feedthepoor.org.uk or visit us at 9 Stony Lane, Sparkbrook. Just £42 will pay for a child's education for a whole year. ISRA UK, feeding the poor since 1984.
You are listening to 93.5 FM, an ACE radio station known as Unity FM. Only by listening you'll realise then you'll want to tune in over and over again.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. This is Unity FM 93.5 FM. Okay, so going back, we've got my guest with me, Martin Glynn, and Abdul Wahid. Are you still with us? Abdul Wahid? Okay, I think we've lost him. Sorry. So Abdul Wahid, hopefully we'll call back. Assalamu alaikum. He was talking about the universal values, and I think that's what our other caller was talking about, the sister that called in, was that, and I guess it's what I was saying, is that when we're practicing Islam, it is a way of life. And from the conversations that we've had, today, you've given me the impression that you definitely had a lot of, experience with the religion of Islam yourself. But yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, I think we have to define between those that are practicing culturally to those that have actually picked up the Quran and that are practicing it as a way of life.
In terms of my work in prison, which I can talk about over the last 30 years, there are many different reasons people offend within all different types of communities. What I've found specifically with Muslim prisoners, I mean, before there was imams were brought into prison, there was nothing. So a lot of Muslim prisoners would get a lot of brutalization based on a lot of right-wing, being in prisons with a lot of racism and a lot of oppression. But the interesting thing about when a lot of Muslim prisoners go to prison, is how Islam affects everything that they think about, that they do, the way that they atone for their sins. And in some respects, it leads to some very, very interesting conversation. What I've discovered is that Islam sometimes leads some Muslims back to Islam in a much more stronger way. I mean, when I've run all Muslim groups as a non-Muslim, and they've had space to share their issues, one of the things about working with Muslim groups is the issue of prayer, and that you structure your program around men going to prayer. Yeah. And it's a very, very different way of working. When in most situations you can go in there and you can do a 3-hour session straight. Yeah. When you work with Muslim prisoners, you can't, because you respect that right. But what happens is when they go away and pray and come back, sometimes there's an awareness of something that they need to do, something that they need to change, the way that they relate to younger prisoners coming in. And what you start to see is older Muslim prisoners suddenly become the kind of father that they weren't in the community. Wow. And become a father to younger prisoners. And the other thing I wanted to say is that we live in a deficit culture, so we like conflict. The vast majority of people are functioning. The vast majority of people are trying the best at what they can do. But I do feel that the epidemic that I'm identifying needs for all of us to, one, come out of denial. Some communities are blighted by certain types of crime that are directly attributable by not having the kind of adult male guidance around the proper use of force and violence in terms of morals and values. Yeah,
I discussed it last week, the topic of forced marriages, for example, where the young girl, she died, I think she was murdered by her parents because she didn't conform to their values. They said she was too British, At the end of the day, this is not Islam. And, the media can somehow put that pinch of salt, oh yeah, this is from Islam. No, it is not. One of the things that liberated the woman with Islam was the stopping of the killing of daughters.
What I wanted to say in respect to that, and it's something in criminology that, again, because if we're looking at solutions, if we look at the word absent father, deadbeat dad, there's a whole series of labels. it's very important that when you're at home and you're in communities, that you begin to question how a label is formed and how it's applied. Because the same way that a label can be come up with and applied, the same way that you can delabel.
Right.
So even the word absent father, it's a very contentious term for people who say, well, I'd like to be part of my children's life, but me and my wife don't get on. It's not his fault that he can't gain access. The CSA, the financial penalties. So in some respects, part of the solution, it starts with a conversation with your children. It starts with parents, single mothers, single fathers, saying to their children, not only you need to have this individual in your life, but how, in light of what we've been through, can we let this individual back? Some fathers can't be back in their children's life because there are issues of abuse. There are a lot of kind of painful issues for families. But for those families who have just broken down through finance or mental health, families can sit down there and say, how can we maintain the family? And to have that discussion. And that doesn't just require... And the one thing I do say that I've discovered with the Islamic context of prison is this notion of the extended family, that a dialogue is not just between mum and dad, it's between the aunties and the uncles. And in some respects, when it comes to, I mean, if you go back to the history of rites of passage, elders played and still do one of the most significant roles in adjudicating.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things guys used to talk to me about is Sharia law. And I used to say to them, how does that work in prison? Because a lot of people don't look at prison, but there's 10,000 Muslims in the British prison system.
Yeah.
So they will have conversations with prison officers about Sharia law, about there are certain things that can be resolved within the Islamic context.
But again, I think this is a miseducation. When it comes to statistics and labelling, for example, you fill in your form, what is your background? Now, I know that I'm British, but should I mention where my parents come from? It becomes, very controversial, I think. It's very ethical when it comes to statistics. But what I wanted to say was that, yes, obviously what you're saying about the elders playing a big part in coming into young people's lives is it's arbitration, and we're told to do that in the Quran. So they're practicing a way of life. However, what I feel is that, maybe the people that ended up in prison have been mixed up with their identities. Like I said last week, we were discussing how do we balance being British, being a Muslim and, having our own ethnic backgrounds. I think when they get into prison, they then come to face with the reality of Islam. We
have a thing called double consciousness.
Yes.
What it is, a classic example in schools, a young Muslim child is a Muslim at home, comes to school, and they suddenly have to morph into something else. And I think in some respects that being able to manage the conflict with having dual identities is something that's an ongoing process. And in some respects, and that's where community comes in, it's about, there are people in the community who are occupying all sorts of spaces in the community who have to manage both. And I think what it's about is that one thing is to say, which PlayStation do you want? Which iPhone do you want to get? The other thing is about identity and how do you shape that person's identity, and they play a role in that. But I also believe that services, especially public services, have a duty to recognise the conflict and actually not make it worse by actually playing games with people's identity. Because, again, I go back to, and it's not specific, if I go back to university, when I lecture at university, one of the things that's very evident, there's a lot of you walk into a classroom and you'll have all the different groups occupying their own separate tables. And what you realise is when you start to talk to them, they all have a kind of fear of asserting their difference because they're fear of the judgment and the labelling that goes along with it. So what I try to do is to, in my classes, and it's very much like having a family, is to get people to argue and debate and put views forward from their own position. And what we start to do is a safe discussion that can be quite heated and assertive at times.
But indeed, yeah, I mean, I guess I did feel that when I went to university myself. But bringing us back to absent fathers, and I think, that's definition of absent father. I mean, what is the definition of absent father?
Well, there is a sociological definition.
Yes.
And the definition is And it's a very flawed definition, but the definition is an absent father is someone who either partially or physically absent in the child's life. It doesn't take it into consideration. So, for instance, the father that ignores his child and he's in the house, that person's not seen as an absent father. But interestingly enough, I did some research, and back in the 30s and 40s, during the Depression era in America, at a time of economic downturn, men tended to define themselves according to work.
Right.
So that when they didn't have work, they disconnected from their children because they felt less of a man. So they wouldn't talk to their children. But on the converse, fathers who were physically not present, who didn't have a job, prepared themselves and actually were more active with their children because they would take them out because it was an event. So you also realise that in an economic downturn, because a lot of societies define fatherhood through being a man, and man tends to be defined for lots of men by an external sense of how much money can I earn, what's the job. What happens is, if that's not there and a father feels less of a man, by and large, he will feel disconnected from his child. So you'll find that there's also absent fathers who are physically present, but psychologically they're just not connected to their children. And a lot of the young people that I talk to on the streets, in prison, they'll come and say to me, you know, I see my dad every day, but I can't talk to him. They can't talk to him about girls. I can't talk to him about money. I can't. So what do? They find alternative people to talk to, and hence the affiliation to possible affiliation to gangs, antisocial behaviour, all the stuff that was identified in the riots. Because the number one issue that came out in the riots is not just about the disintegration of families, but in specific terms, the disproportionate amount of young men, the age of those young men in relationship to the significant person in their life, i.e. their father, was not present.
Okay, wow. Very important things that you've raised there. So really then, as a mother, because there are some parents who, you know, got raised without their fathers, and they say, you know what, this ain't going to happen to me. You know, I'm going to do my best to do right by my child, you know, but hence they end up getting pregnant, and you know, the father doesn't end up playing a part. And I'm seeing this in the Asian communities, in black communities. It's out there, you know. You know, so clearly from what I've just got from what you've said, you know, some things are out of our control. And the man himself has to go through his journey. However, as a mother, you know, what can we do? We've just got a call on the other line. I'm hoping. Assalamu alaikum. Oh, welcome back, Abdul Wahid.
Yeah,
you disappeared on us.
Yeah, I got cut off.
Okay, right, so, yeah, we were just going on a point. Martin Glynn just mentioned that some things really, if you want to reaffirm that's what I was saying, is that are out of our control. There are some fathers who may not be able to psychologically connect to their children because of their own issues, you know. So what I was trying to get out of you, Abdul Wahid, was really, as, you know, the Muslim mother, for example, you know, what advice could you give to her, you know, in terms of, you know, maybe putting a bit of softness in, you know, protecting her child and putting a bit of softness in the father's heart? You know, is there anything we can do according to Quran and Sunnah?
I'm not...
No pressure, sorry.
Yeah.
You know, just like the whole absent father things, Islam is a way of life. You know, what does Islam say on absent fathers, you know?
The way that I'd frame it, just in the way that I have to do it in a prison, because as you can appreciate, as I said, as a non-Muslim, when I've got a group of 30 Muslim men and they're all over the age of 25 and they talk to me about their children, one of the first things I say is first about, is there an Islamic restriction on how you can parent one from a distance? And what is the position? And a lot of the times, what you realise is it's actually nothing to do with Islam. It's to do with masculine pride.
Yeah.
And therefore, what I tend to do, based in my position, is to tackle them on the kind of masculinity issue and say that actually, the more that you engage with your children, even as difficult it is, it actually strengthens your position as a man, and certainly in the eyes of the mother, it could have a bigger impact because you're demonstrating that being a man is sharing the responsibility as opposed to abdicating it.
That's right, yeah, definitely. And I think what needs to be emphasised, and it's a good way to do it, is through actual examples from history of for example, positive role models, the first and foremost being the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is teaching the small skills i.e. it's not difficult. So some people may think, okay, to actually raise a child is, to engage with them, to be there for them is a feat, and it's really hard and difficult. But it's a number of small skills where if they're taught them and they're taught how to utilize them, it can become habit after a while of actually doing them. So I think a lot of it is not having the know-how, because coming yourself or person himself coming from a family where it was a single parent family, mother was the one that raised, they don't feel confident or comfortable dealing, for example, as a father with kids maybe. So I think a lot of it is actually re-educating, giving them the skills, and using many examples from history.
Can also use something as well, is that when I'm dealing with faith communities across the board around this particular issue, one of the ways that you can transmit those values and get some change is the way in which culture can play a role. I use theatre a lot. And one of the things I do is, whether it's taking proverbs out the Bible, I do work with Muslim men who will give me something from the Quran that becomes either a story, a new children's story, or a piece of theatre, because I think that in principle we need to learn something, but the way that we learn is either through storytelling, it could be spiritually through prayer, and for me, I would suggest that one of the things that you do have at your disposal within the Quran, there are stories that illustrates this issue that can be adapted in a form that doesn't break any Islamic rules, but presents it in a way that people can consume it. Because and this is where I go back to academics and I go back to artists in the community. There's a lot of people at the moment doing, for instance, if there are Muslim hip-hop artists out there, then one of the tracks that they should do is addressing young people through hip-hop, if they use hip-hop as a medium, around this issue. If there are singers out there, there's all sorts of cultural practices that can utilize the Quran if it's Islamic to do so. And that's why I said, because from my point of view, anytime I'm in my situation, I don't have the luxury of having the insight that you have. So I'm always in a situation where I'm having to say to guys I'm working with, is this Islamic?
See, ultimately, let's not fall far from the point here, is that as a professional, being exposed to so many different religions, Islam should be standing out from amongst the rest now to show you that it is a way of life. And obviously, it's an individual journey for everybody, and that's what I'm thinking here is that, you are becoming, you're being exposed to a wealth of knowledge. And I know my experience is what got me here to starting to practice Islam. And so, Abdul Wahid, rounding up, because we're coming to the end of the show now, at ICT, you do a lot of work in the community. What kind of advice could you give? What could I do, to help my sisters in Islam? Because there are many of them that I do see that are going through this. Is there any room for the masjids to get involved?
No, definitely. I think they should definitely be involved, and there should be a place where the sisters and the brothers, the Muslim men and the Muslim women, feel that they can actually go there to get the support or the assistance and the facilitation that they need to actually, resolve any issues of dispute or conflict with regards to this type of issue.
And let's go back to the main point. What are the rights of the child?
Without a doubt, Islamically, the rights of the child is that they're brought up in a safe, secure, loving environment, and that has to be maintained at all times.
But in the instance of separation, so the father.
In the instance of separation, it would be wherever that's maintained, basically. So, for example, if it's with the mother, then that's where the child will stay at. I mean, to be honest with you, there are actual rulings and regulations concerning it, and we don't have the time to go into it. So I wouldn't want to begin it and not be able to finish.
Fair enough.
So that would need a separate, for example, show, or half of a show at least.
Yeah.
So we can look at the different. But the principle fundamentally is that wherever, for example, is better for the child, safer, secure, and more loving, the best environment, that's where the child is always going to be, basically. So that's the general principle that applies in all the different types of circumstance, like if the father's travelling, the mother's resident, if the mother's resident, the mother's travelling, the father's resident. It's loads of different situations that Islam addresses each individual one. But the general principle is that the child has to be in an environment where there's love, support, there's care, there's maintenance, financial as well. It's obviously without that included, because you can't have a child starving to death and anything like that. But all of these features. But I think the advice, passing or closing advice would be that the absent father isn't just down to the father. Sometimes it's down to the mother as well. So it's something where they both need to be involved in it.
Yeah.
The mother and the father. It's not just the father, because there's a lot of factors which lead to that, and some of them are obviously solely at the doorstep of the father, but some of them are due to, for example, the discussions with the mother on money or other things that make a father less comfortable being present, if you get what I mean. So there's a lot of factors.
Martin, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add something. I do a lot of work around restorative justice, and recently I've done about 200 family support workers in Birmingham around family support workers supporting families who's gang affiliated. And one of the things that I have to do with the workers in particular is to give them a difference in the way that men and women construct their identities in society and how that impacts on families. And I think in some respects that there are some simple things for me that can take place. The fact is there's a lot of women out there that have got children. The man ain't coming back. He's not going to be in their lives. And I think what it's about is the same way with Alcoholics Anonymous, you've got a 12-point program. What's needed is like a 10-point plan, something practical where you get a group of women in, and what you do is you work with those women to identify, one, the kind of children that they've got, what their support needs are, and who can facilitate those support needs. Because as a criminologist, I mean, I hear a lot of cosy conversations, and that's important. But I also deal with murder victims, and I deal with the victims of extreme kinds of crime as a consequence of young people not coping. And I think sometimes it's about having a hard conversation to say to parents, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because the evidence can support that. And I think where people like me need some advice and guidance is where do I find a place for my voice to support yourselves? Because what I've found historically in the last 30 years, and you hear that, I hear it because I'm not a Christian either. What you do hear sometimes is, you're not a Muslim, you're not this, you're not that. But on another level, I have a level of expertise that can be utilised with those communities. So I would say for me, part of that solution is how do communities I'm not connected to enable me to pass on what I know so that people like yourselves can use it, so I don't have to then get labelled as you're not a Muslim.
Yeah. No, that's something which needs to happen, to be honest with you. The fact that you're on the show, I think, is the beginning of that happening, and I hope it is. I mean, I do hope that I get your details from.
Yeah, definitely.
And likewise, I just want to say, thanks for giving me the space and giving me an opportunity to hear both your views.
Okay, so again, I want to thank you, Abdul Wahid, for calling back in, and hopefully we'll speak soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so just rounding up. If you've listened to the show and there is anything that you was bursting to say, you can contact me, email me at iamshalina@live.co.uk. Shalina spelled Shalina. Martin Glynn, if anybody wants to contact you, is how can we contact you?
You can get me on my email address. My email address is M for Martin, Soulfires, and that's S for sugar, OUL, Soul, Fires, FIRES for sugar, msoulfires@yahoo.co.uk. But if people don't contact me direct, maybe there's another opportunity to come and share some vibes, because in the future work I'm doing here and abroad, because I want to kind of internationalize this, because it's become an epidemic. It's affected too many people, and I for one just feel that part of my purpose is to pursue this agenda rigorously, regardless of what public opinion is out there.
Yeah, if anything comes my way, I'll forward it to you gladly, inshallah. So yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot from this show, I think, and I think we may need to do a part 2, maybe on talking more so about the reconnection side, because I know that you've gone through your own journey Which
is,
you know,
I would say, I mean, it's ironic because in about 4 weeks' time, I'm going to be working in a prison. And for the first time, we've got a prison as part of their pre-release program is going to let me work with a group of prisoners on the emotional side of reconnecting with their children. And some of these men have been away for 10, 15 years. Some of them have done life sentences. And to tell you the truth, I think the fact that a prison is as forward-thinking to recognise men's emotional capacity in this area is a step forward. So I look forward to coming back and having more conversations.
Okay, so we're going to try and do a part 2 then next week on this, inshallah. So any questions, please email me. I am Shalina at live.co.uk. And yeah, you know, we'll look at how do, you know, we get that reconnection. Maybe how do mothers, you know, deal with their children if their fathers aren't going to play a part in their lives, unfortunately, due to them being in prison or maybe dying, or, you know, there are so many reasons that can be of an issue. So rounding up, you said that there was a panel. We've got a minute officially left.
I just want to say that out of the work that I've done and the riots panel, they've set up now the foundation for National Father Absence Commission.
Excellent.
Which is to look at the strategic concerns, which is to and then my job is to then translate those strategic concerns into enabling practitioners who work with people affected.
Excellent.
And also community organisations and groups. What tools do they need to do the job? And that will be informed by a whole series of cultural factors, social factors, and stuff like that. So what I'm suggesting is that there's a movement.
Brilliant. So, okay. So if anybody wants to get in touch for next week's show, then please do, inshallah. So rounding up, it's been a great show. I hope everyone had a great Eid. And I look forward to seeing you next week in part 2 of Absent Fathers, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Was talk of mine, but not mine.
This is Hamza Perez. You're listening to... This is Hamza Perez. You're listening to Unity FM 93.5, the heart of the city.
Palestine, a nation under siege. Help Interpal with the Gaza Crisis Appeal and please donate generously. Our aim is to support the needy Palestinians in the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan and Lebanon. Come and visit our new office and charity shop, which is now open at 137 to 139 Stratford Road, Sparkbrook. The shop offers a wide range of Palestinian products, including dates, olive oil, Islamic art frames, hijabs, scarves and so much more. Buy gifts for your families and help support Interpal. Please call 0121 771 2762 or go to interpal.org. Interpal, helping Palestinians in need.
Shabir Nawab & Co. Accountants, celebrating 21 years of success in the accountancy profession. Our services include accounts, auditing, self-assessment, payroll, VAT, limited company formations and dealing with tax and VAT investigations. We specialize in healthcare and welcome professionals in the consultancy profession. Why not join us in our success? Visit our website at shabirnawab.co.uk for more details or call 0121 456 1777. That's 456 1777. Shabir Nawab & Co. Accountants for a complete accountancy solution.
Are you planning for Hajj or Umrah? Well, think no more. Al Magawi Travel offers Hajj and Umrah services and worldwide air tickets. We are originally from Makkah and we only promise what we can deliver. We also offer halal investment in Makkah and Medina. Al Magawi Travel is IATA accredited, ATOL protected and approved by the Saudi authority. We are based in Birmingham at 72 Hobmore Road, Small Heath, B10 9BU, opposite Al Hijra Mosque and next to Al Hijra Library. For more details, please call 0121 753-0378 or visit hajjandumrahtravel.com.
Tired of looking at the same old carpet? Well, look no more. We at Heritage Carpets Limited have a 15,000 square feet warehouse. Over 700 rolls of carpets on display, all fitted for free. Heritage has the Midlands' largest collection of rugs, vinyls and laminate flooring. For your free quotation, measurement and fitting, call 0121 778 6444. Open 7 days a week with nationwide fitting services available. We'll beat all genuine written quotations. Visit us at Unit 2AB 47 Foreman's Road, Sparkhill, B11 3AR or online at heritagecarpetsltd.co.uk. Remember, flooring is part of our heritage.
Muslim Aid is responding to the desperate crisis in Syria. Operating on the Lebanon and Jordan borders, Muslim Aid is providing medical care and food to people fleeing the fighting. Your help is needed now. Please donate by calling 020-7377-4200 or visit muslimaid.org. Thank you.
This is Sheikh Abu Hanifa. You are listening to Unity FM on 93.5.
Have you suffered injury from an accident in the last 3 years which wasn't your fault? Our team of specialist personal injury lawyers at Claim PI Solicitors can help you claim compensation. Whether you've had a slip or trip, an accident at work, or been involved in a road traffic accident, call 0121 366 0444 for honest and reliable legal advice. Remember, no fees, no deductions. You keep 100% of your compensation. There is no shame in making an honest claim. Call 0121 366 0444. Claim PI Solicitors. People who care. People you can trust.